Alright. Right. So the objective of this is to show you guys how to absolutely maximize training PCs. Cool. And so the first day, we have most people have day one, day two. We added an orientation to ours. Cool. So when I'm saying day one, I'm actually talking about like day one of training, not orientation. So we've got orientation, day one, day two. Everyone good? For those who are adding the orientation. If not, then it's just day one, day two. So the first thing, day one PCs happen at the end of the day when we start the phone jam, right? So everyone starts making phone calls and we let them know, hey, during this next segment, we're going to be grabbing you guys one by one, or we'll be calling you. One of our assistants will call you. We're going to walk through your schedule. We're going to make sure that we have a great game plan, answer any questions you have, and make sure you're set up for success. Cool. And so now the phone jam starts and we start grabbing people. And so you'll have the people that you're meeting with, and you want to pull them into a room if you want to pull up the schedule and just do it with them. Or you can be on the phone and just make sure they have it up and you have it up so that they can see what you're doing on the living document, right? On the Google form that's like alive and they can see you adding stuff as you're asking them or whatever it might be. All right. So this right here, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Is the day one PC outline. All right. So this is what I have done for years and years and years. And then I will show you guys the day two when they come into training in the beginning. All right. So again, this is the end of day one. The other one is the beginning of day two. So at the end of day one, we're going to grab people. And so this here, I'm like, hey, so, how are you feeling so far? Like any questions from yesterday or today? Are you overwhelmed about anything? Is it easy to absorb? Are you feeling good, excited, nervous? Like, how do you feel? Right. And you don't have to say all the things, but I usually do. They're like, oh, I'm really excited, or like, oh, I'm really nervous, or yeah, I'm excited and nervous, or, they might ask some questions. And so, we take care of those. Cool. If you're not sure how to answer a question, post it in the manager group. Okay. That way you can get support. And so people can help you if there's a certain question you're not sure how to answer. And so once they share that, I'm like, awesome. I'm like, well, hey, do your parents know what you're doing? And some will say yes, and some will say no. All right. And so it is very important, no matter what they say, that you share. So if they say, yes, my parents know what I'm doing, right? I'm like, oh, how do they feel about the position? Right. I'm like, typically, if people don't know the job, they're usually a little bit skeptical. They're like, yeah, they are, and so it's okay to throw that out there, right? You're kind of giving them permission to say that, because just think about like if you did it and they want to say that, they feel weird. They don't want to tell the boss, my parents think this is sketchy, sometimes like they just don't want to look bad. So it's kind of opening that door and giving them permission to be able to say what is, right? So I'm like, hey, so your parents know about what you're doing? They say yes. I'm like, awesome. How are they feeling about the position? I'm like, the reason I ask is most parents, if they don't know the job, they're definitely sketched out. They're like, oh yeah, my parents too. And I'm like, totally normal, right? Or they'll say, oh, my parents are really excited. My uncle sold Cutco and paid his way through college. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing, right? Like you'll bump into those sometimes, but most will say their parents know and they're just kind of like, whatever about it. They're just like, okay, try it out. You will have some, that say like, my parents just don't want me to do this. And when you have that, you want to say, hey, I totally understand. I'm like, here's what I would recommend. Be like, we've had people, and by the way, you guys can share me. You can use me as the example. My mom did not want me to do this. My mom was like, this is dumb. Get another job. What are you thinking? So you can say, hey, our division manager, Mrs. Kristen, her mom was so anti this job. And she was like, she needs to get a real job and like, all the stuff. Which by the way, my mom calls me like every week asking me for money now. But anyway, she's like, get a real job. What are you doing? Yada yada. And it's just normal because they just don't understand the job. And so here's what I'll tell you guys what my friend Peter told me, and you can say this is what Mrs. Kristen's friend who worked with Cutco told her to tell her mom, and I'll just pass this on to you. But she just said, can you give me 2 weeks to try it out? Even 1 week, like what's the worst that can happen? I get a guaranteed pay of $20 for every appointment I do. And at the end of the week, mom, if you really hate it, I'll go and look for another job, but can I at least just try it out? Because I really think this could be cool and it'll help me a lot. And there's cool perks for school. Right. And so it was just walking them through that combo of saying like, hey mom, can you give me a week to just try it out? Right. I have a guaranteed pay of $20 and I'm not putting any money down or anything. I'm not losing anything. Right. And so can I at least try it out and see how it feels and see, and then go from there. And after the week, if you just really hate it, like I'll look for another job, but I'd really love to try it out. And my dad and my mom was like, My dad's like, that's fair, Mickey, like, let's give her a shot, and like, all right, fine. But let's just see how it goes. I'm just not comfortable. And I was like, no, I get it. But after my first week, you know what happened? And you should like all her friends were like, oh my God, Kathy was so great. Oh my God, Kathy called me. Like, I was so impressed with her, like so professional and like all this stuff. And everyone was bragging about me. How do you think my mom felt? She was like, oh, okay, like, and she started coming around, right? She started turning around. I remember the same thing happened, and you guys could share if you need to a story of Mario. Write this down. Mario Sabates. Mario's dad was like, this is crap. I'm not giving you any of my people. I don't want you bothering our friends. This is literally what he told him, right? And so Mario was like really discouraged because like that's what he was counting on getting a lot of his leads from. And I just, what we did is we said, hey Mario, who are some of your best friends? How about some of your best friends' parents who like adore you, right? Do you have any teachers? How about soccer coaches? He played soccer. And he's like, yeah, I have a couple people there. I'm like, let's just focus on those this weekend. Go have fun with them. Cool. Do you have any of your aunt's phone numbers? Like, you don't need to ask your dad for your aunt's phone number. Do you have any of your aunt's phone numbers that love you, or grandma or anything? He's like, yeah. I'm like, let's just go there. All right. So skip dad, skip all his friends, mom and dad's friends. Let's just start with your aunts, your grandma, your best friend's parents, your coach, and let's roll from there. Cool. By the way, his first week, that's what he did. And so his first weekend, he did, I don't know, like 7 appointments, hit like I don't know, like hit his first promotion, sold a little more, but he got some great leads. And then that week, he just like he kept filling up with like leads he was getting from other people, and people that he would ask like, oh, do you have so and so's number? Do you have so and so? Like because they knew some of the same family friends, and so he got them from other people. And at the end of the week, his first week, Mario was number 6 in the nation. He sold $12,000. He made $700 in income. And his dad, he showed his dad, like, oh, dad, look, I was number 6 in the nation. And his dad was like, wow. He's like, huh, son, I didn't really think I didn't think this was legit. I didn't think you were actually going to go through with this. He's like, but everyone's been telling me how great you've been doing. And you know what? I want to see your presentation, And he watched it and he ended up giving him 50 people to go see, right? And by the way, true story, Mario was All-American scholarship winner that summer, All-American scholarship winner that fall. He got to run a branch the next summer. He became a district manager. And then he went back to school and went to law school, and he's a lawyer now, right? And so super cool. But just, like sometimes like you're going to have, when your parents are like not like all for something or like discouraging or they don't like it, it's just because they're trying to protect you. So guys, write that down. You have to make sure that the rep understands that their parents not just an a-hole, and we don't think they're an a-hole either. We understand where the parents coming from, right? And so we're like, hey, we totally get it. This is weird. This is different, right? And your parents just want to protect you. They want to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. They want to make sure you're not being scammed, right? They want to make sure that you're safe. Like that's a parental thing. Like they just want to protect you. So sometimes it doesn't feel like it. It feels like they're annoying and over controlling, but they're just trying to protect you. All right. And so they're like, all right, cool. I'm like, so just talk to your parents and don't stress. All right. If we can't start with them, we'll start with some other people, and then hopefully, the next week or two, they'll come around and they'll want to see what you're doing. So any questions there? Any comments there? Molly, anything you've come across there? All right. And so I'm like, all right, so talk to me real quick. What did you want to gain by working here? Like, what are your objectives for the position? And they'll share. If they say money, what's your response? I'm like, hey, money for what? I'm like, are you trying to buy a house? Are you trying to buy a car? Are you trying to pay for school? Like, what do you want money for? Right? Because when they say everything, I'm like, that's great. But are there any specific things you're really excited about? I'm like, I love helping people hit their goals. And the more specific, the better we can plan for them. Right. And so, if they say experience, oh, I want experience, Kristen. You're like, okay, awesome. I'm like, what kind of experience? And how will that help you for your future? And so what is happening there is that what you're actually doing is like they're selling themselves on how this will benefit them. Does that make sense? Instead of you selling them, right? Now you can add to it, but you're just like, oh, how do you feel that'll help you? I'm like, oh, cool. And I'm like, oh, do you think it would also help you with X, Y, and Z? I'm like, oh, it's awesome, right? I'm like, so if you're gonna rank what's most important to you, like 1 through 5, or you can tie some if you want to tie them, income, experience, prizes, advancement, what do you feel is most important to you, right? And that's just a cool thing for you guys to know because it helps you really manage your people the right way. It helps you really coach your people. So once they tell me that, I'm like, awesome. I'm like, well, I'm really excited to share with Mr. and Mrs. Kristen and make sure that we have a plan to really help you hit those goals. Cool. And just so we know what's the best way to coach you. Like, do you like the tough coach who's like, come on, what? You don't have what it takes, right? Like the football type coach. Or do you prefer more of the cheerleader coach who's like, you can do it? Yeah. Like, what's your preference? Do you like to be challenged or you like to constantly be motivated or a combo of both, right? And they'll tell you, write this down. This is important that you guys know this because Angie Gonzalez in my office, she was, okay, so I'm going to use Donovan and Angie, right? They're the example I typically use here. But Donovan Taylor, he was definitely someone that wanted to be like constantly encouraged. Like he was super sensitive. And I could think of a couple leaders in our organization right now who fit this bill, and I won't say their names, but very sensitive. All right. And so he, with Donovan, if I was like, Donovan, what's up, man? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, do you not like, you don't know what you're like, what's going, or if I challenge him, like, what, you're going to let so-and-so beat you? I'm like, can you even do this? Right. Like if I ever said anything like that, he would like go cry in the corner and probably quit. All right. And then you have Angie, right? Angie was the complete opposite. And so Donovan needed like, Donovan, you got this, da, 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 whatever. Like, what are we doing here? And like, just really encouraging. And if I did that to Angie, if I was like, oh, you're awesome, like, good job, you're kicking butt, like, keep up the great work. But if I just always manage her like that, she just kind of like, she was the one that likes to prove you wrong. And I'm like, Angie, I don't know if you have what it takes to get this done. She's like, what? I'm gonna show you, like she always says, she's like, when people tell me I can't do something, like it motivates me more. Like when people think I can do something, I'm like, oh, whatever, I'm not even motivated to do it. But like when people challenge me, she's like, that's what like fires me up. Like when I feel like they don't believe in me or whatever, I'm like, I'll show you, and that's like how she was. So you want to know that because everyone's managed differently, right? And you can't manage everyone the same way because you're not going to produce the results that you want to produce. All right. And so you guys need to be very aware of this because it's very, very different. Cool. The next thing is I'm like, hey, so just so I know, like, are you someone that enjoys competition? Right. And they'll be like, not really. Well, that's important to know because if you're constantly like, oh, we got this, let's win this, they're like, I don't really care, right? Like that's not going to get them to move. And so we have to find out the other things that motivate them, right? Maybe it was just earning that money for that car. Maybe it was taking mom on vacation. That is motivating as hell to them, but winning a trophy isn't. Does that make sense? And so it's important that you understand, like, do they care about competition or not, right? Some people are competitive as shit and some people are not. Everyone understand that. Can you get thumbs up? All right. And then when they tell me, like, if they say like, oh, Michael, yeah, I'm super competitive. I'm like, okay. I'm like, and just so I know, are you more competitive versus yourself and your personal best, or are you more competitive against other people? And that's different. There are, most of my guys that I've worked with, the majority of my competitive people, and I'm talking about probably 70, 80% or more of my competitive people are competitive against others. They always wanted to beat the other people, beat the other team, beat the whatever, right? Against their personal best, small percent. I'm one of those, by the way. I'm competitive as hell against me, against my personal best. I like to beat other people, but I'm very competitive against myself. So like my original DVM, he would always try to pin me up with it. Oh, Jake said he's going to beat you, so and so, and I was like, I don't give a fuck. Like that never made me work harder. Okay. But my other DVM, he would be like, hey, Kat, this is your best week so far. Do you think you could beat that? I'm like, yeah, I think I can do it. Like, and like that would excite me. Like he would always show me like what my best week was, what my best month was, what my best campaign was. And like that excited me to go after and beat my personal best, because that's like me progressing, me growing. And like that was me being competitive and just always striving for more. Right. And so you want to know that. And, again, sometimes it's a combination of things, but just you learning that. Any questions so far? By the way, I'm explaining a lot as I'm going through. You guys don't have to say all this stuff and all these stories, right? I'm teaching you guys. This should take you guys 7 to 10 minutes, okay? As you guys go through this. So you're like, all right, so let's look at this. How many people are on your list so far? They're like, oh, I have, 28. I'm like, awesome. And how many of those are max? 12. I'm like, all right. I'm like, so how many numbers of max do you already have in the app? And then I'm going to give them ideas on how to get more. I'm like, so did you play sports? And by the way, the best thing you can do, make a note when you're going to meet with someone, pull up their application. Cool. Pull up their, and if we have that, which actually we're going to be back to the get to know you sheets. We've got to get the get to know you sheets. And those we have a virtual get to know you sheet, and then we have physical sheets that we'll have at the office that they can fill out. But when I go to meet, I like to look at that because I like to know, like, did they play sports? Are they involved with this or that? Or they're in blank club or they're in robotics or whatever it is. And so when they tell me I've got 7 max and I see that they were in FFA, and they were National Honor Society, and then whatever, I'm like, okay. I'm like, hey, do you think that if you reached out to some of like the FFA, like kids' parents, like some of your coaches, you could probably get some more? And they're like, oh yeah, I just didn't have their numbers yet. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, so we want to expand on that, so we can, help you with that. Like how many, like tonight, if you really focused, all right, and this is not on here, but you want to ask them, like, if you really focused tonight and used Facebook, use your mom's address book, use any school directories, church directories, sports directories, FFA, this, that, the other, like just listing off stuff. I'm like, how many more do you think you could get? And I'm like, those are some of the best resources that our top people have used. And I highly recommend that. And they're like, oh, okay, And I'm like, now let's talk about your best five. Who are the top 5 customers? Tell me about them. I'm like, who are your guaranteed sales? I'm like, all right, and who are you seeing first? And so you want to look. So I'm like, this one, I'm like, what do you think they'll get? I'm like, small, medium, or large. I'm like, how many of those 5 can you definitely book this weekend? So like I walk through their first 5 just to see who they are. Sometimes someone they put in their best 5 is not a best 5. It's actually somebody who they just feel comfortable with, right? So I want to make sure that when they put their best 5, it's actually their best 5, right? Like they're like, it's my uncle, he owns a business, my aunt loves to cook, they have 2 houses, they travel all the time, like whatever it is. But it's like, I want to know who are their best people. And this is big, by the way. If I didn't know this about Caden, if I hadn't done this PC with Caden would have sold 2 to 3 grand instead of 16 grand. And you, as a new manager, would have been excited about your rep selling 2 or 3 grand, right? But if I knew that one of his best 5 was his grandpa, and his grandpa owned a bait shop down in Lake Jackson, and his grandpa lived in Lake City, and his grandpa loved to cook, and grandma. And so when he called me and said, okay, my grandpa and grandma are considering the either like the signature or the complete set, which is what they were first going to get, we gave them a deal with the complete. I was like, oh, definitely do the complete. I'm like, they can do this deal, or they can do this free. And they were like, sweet. And then I said, hey, how many did he want? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, didn't you tell me he had a house in Lake City and a house in Lake Jackson? And he said, yeah. I said, well, make sure your grandpa knows that when you buy in bulk, you get better deals, first off. But second, we have buy 3, get 1 free on all of our sets. I said, I don't know that he needs 4 complete sets, right? But if he had one for each house, I said, I don't know if he has someone who like runs the bait shop for him. Like my head leaders in my businesses, like I really take care of them, right? Like I took Mary Lou to Brazil to go to the Olympics. Like I did different things like to say thank you, and just appreciation for the hard work they do, right? And so that is something that, and so he was like, oh, and I was like, so just check. I'm like, because if he has someone that runs that business for him, I said, and then I don't know, is there someone he needs a Mother's Day gift for? This was like right before Mother's Day. I said, just check it out, but just make sure that they know that they could do buy 3, get 1 free on the set, on the complete set. So if they need any gifts or if they want to have one for both houses, they can do that. If they don't need more than 2, we could still do a buy 3, get 1 free type of deal. They could buy the 2 complete sets. They could buy another $1,500 worth of stuff, and we can give them another $1,500 worth of stuff for free. Cool. I said, just make sure grandpa knows. And like we went back and forth, long story short, $16,000 order. They did buy 3, get 1 free complete sets. They added like 20 fishing knives. They added other stuff. We like gave them a killer deal. But if I hadn't known that from the PC, I could have never directed that. Does that make sense? So you want to get to know who your people are seeing, because it allows you to give suggestions and bring stuff up that they have no idea are possible. All right. So that's really important. Sorry, guys. Then once we talk about, I'm like, so how many of those 5 do you think you can get booked up this weekend? Right. And then I'm like, how awesome would it be to get those lined up this weekend? I go, and let's say like you think your aunt's gonna get like a homemaker, and your other one, maybe they get the smaller set, right? And then the other one maybe gets a medium set, and then the other one maybe buys a complete set, right? And what did you say you think this one's gonna get? Yeah, I'm like, let's calculate that. I'm like, that's over $3,000. I'm like, that's 2 promotions that you can put on your resume. I had 2 promotions my first weekend with a $250 million company and made $400. Would that be exciting? They're like, yeah. I'm like, by the way, If you book those 5, you give yourself a shot for that. Cool. I can't guarantee it, but I've seen so many people do that. All right. So I would work my butt off to try to get those tomorrow night, 3 or 4 of them if you can, and then book the other ones for Sunday because it's really going to help build your confidence and it's really going to get you off to a fast start. Cool. And so, last things, real quick, schedule. What's your schedule look like the next 10 days? What do you have going on? What do you have personally? What do you have family? Like, what's happening? I'm like, do you have another job? I'm like, let's just fill this out real quick. Um, like, specifically, let's focus on this weekend. And I want to make sure that we have their weekend ready to go from now through Monday. And so update their schedule, figure out like what their goal is for each day. And I'm like, all right, awesome. I'm like, so it looks like this weekend, you can do 3 on Saturday. Looks like Sunday you can do 7. Monday you can do 4. All right. And what's great, guys, is next week we go to, like for, depending where you're watching this video, if you're watching the replay, when you go into summer, in summer, we launch on a Friday, right? Since we're not in school instead of a Saturday. So they have Friday night, which is awesome. They have all of Saturday, they have all of Sunday, and they have Monday for their first paycheck, guys. That's money for our people. They have so much opportunity to get themselves a big fatty check. All right. And when they go out and earn that income, there's a confidence that's built of like, oh, wow, maybe I can do this job. Maybe I can be good at this. And it helps create longevity. All right. And so we want to help our reps see success right away because we want to help boost their confidence. So that way, they want to be here longer. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. And so that's really important. So after so once I figure out, so I'm like, oh, okay, cool, so you can do 2 Friday, and then you have your family birthday dinner, and then Saturday looks like you can do like 7 or 8. Sunday looks like you can do 10. I'm like, ooh, you're looking good. I'm like, Sunday, and I add it up and I'm like, all right, so that's, and I always show them, I'm like, so that is, and I'll just put it in a little cell. I'm like, it looks like that is a total of 21 appointments. I'm like, let's just say, Kristen, that you completed 16 of those. And I write this in their Excel sheet. Then I'm like, so 16 of them times 60% is 9.6 sales. And let's just do it by 300. Cool. We'll go lower than the average order. I'm like, that's 28.80. I'm like, by the way, the averages show you'll hit 2 promotions and make over $400. Would you be excited about that? I'm like, pretty cool, huh? I'm like, and by the way, if you really follow what we've taught you in training and what we're going to finish tomorrow, if you take that and you call us for support and help, I'm like, I am very confident we can help you blow those numbers out of the water. Cool. So just so I know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard do you really want to work your first 10 days? Like your first week, your first 10 days, when your fast start, all the contests, everything, like how hard do you want to work just that week? After that week, we'll make a normal schedule, right? And so I always let them know that, like, this is not what they're committing to, like as a normal schedule long term. It's just like, just for this week, Mike, right? So it's like, just this week, how hard are you able to work this week? And then afterwards we'll make a schedule. And they'll say, oh, it's really hard or kind of medium. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, cool. I'm like, do I have permission to help you hit your goals? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, all right, great. I'm like, all right, so tonight, we're gonna be making calls. There's some people making calls till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Some people are making calls till 10:30 or later. That's totally up to you. We're gonna have the Zoom room open till about 9. After that, we're heading out to get wings. But you're welcome to keep making phone calls and like keep it, go. I'm like, but the effort you put in tonight to making those calls will pay off tenfold. Like, so, and you want to make a plan, right? So they have 50 names or they have 20 names. I'm like, so we need to work right now. Let's call those 20 names. Call me as soon as you finish those 20 names, or like let me know on Zoom, like you're done with those 20 names, so we can get a plan for the next step to collect more phone numbers. And then we're going to call the new numbers we get. And then you're going to go back around like 8:30 and you're going to call back all the people you called first that didn't pick up and see if we catch them. Cool. Because you want to try 3 different ways to catch people. So we're going to call them now. We're going to call them later if they don't pick up. And then we're going to call them tomorrow around morning or lunchtime, so we can help you knock that out. Does that sound good? I'm like, cool. Can I count on you? Give me an update at blank time. And so I always give them like a time or whatever. So like, let's say someone just has 12 numbers, right, Michael? And they're like, gonna make, I'm like, okay, well, I said, how long do you think it'll take you to make those 12 calls? Right? I'm like, cool. I'm like, why don't you give me a call within 30 minutes? All right. Or 30, 40 minutes. And I'll give them a time. So I'm like, all right, let's see. It's 8:44. So let's say 9:15. Do you feel comfortable? 30 minutes, we can knock those 12 calls out. And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like, and if it takes longer, just let me know by 8:15. Hey, Kat, I'm still finishing those calls. And then when you're done, call me and give me updates. Cool. And then we'll make the next plan from there. I'm like, I'm here to coach you. I'm like, harder you want to go, the bigger you want to go. I'm like, I'm here to help you every step of the way. All right. So they just need to feel that. So I know I took a long time, but again, any questions from today? Any overwhelmed, easy to absorb, feeling good, excited, nervous? Like, how you feeling? And they're like, oh, I'm feeling good. I'm like, well, I'm super excited to help you. I'm like, by the way, do your parents know about what you're doing? I'm like, and how do they feel about the position? I'm like, super normal for parents to be weirded out. It's such a different type of job, you know? And so if they have negative parents, you go into that. If not, you're just like, all right, so what did you want to gain by working here? Like, what are your objectives for the position? Money, experience, like what are you looking for? And then find out for what. And I'm like, and just so we coach you, at the best level, like, how do you like to be coached? Like, are you, there's two main types of styles, right? There's the tough coach, like, come on in, like, then they're challenging you, and they're just like, I don't know if you got what it takes, man. Like, we need this, whatever. And people like that football type coach. And then there's the cheerleader coach, like, you can do it, you got it, yay, and like it's all positive. I'm like, what is your style? And some people it's a combo, right? And they'll tell you, and I'm like, all right, sweet. I'm like, and do you enjoy competition? And they'll tell you yes or no. You can sense by their reaction, right? They're like, oh, kind of, like, not really. They don't really that much, they're like, oh yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm super competitive, right? Or you'll have the ones that are like, hell yeah. I'm like, okay, all right, awesome. And would you say that you're more competitive versus yourself or versus others? And I'm like, all right. So let's look at your list. How many max so far? We walk through the max, we walk through the best five, we look at their schedule, and we're like, all right, let's do this thing, right? So that should take you about 10 minutes to walk through. If they have a lot of questions, if they have a lot of concerns, it might take a little longer. And if you're gonna have to work with that person more, it's okay to say, you know what, Johnny, let's get you start making those calls. Okay. I'm gonna help you make a plan after. Let me meet with a couple of the other people I need to meet with, and then I'm gonna come back to you. Okay. And they're like, all right, cool. And then send them to the phone jam room to make calls while you talk to the other people. And then you come back to them to help them. Like if they have a lot of questions, or like, I was wondering about this, I'm like, I'll answer some things quickly. And I'm like, hey, if you have more, I would love to dive in with you. I want to make sure to respect time and meet with the others. Are you cool if you start making those calls? I meet with the other people I need to meet with, and then we can circle back around. They're like, yeah. All right. So don't be afraid to do that. Questions, comments?
So many freaking nuggets. Oh my gosh.
Great. Then the last set, day 2 of training, right, which is their launch day, graduation day. This is the day 2 PC. All right. And so this is 4 to 8 minutes, right? We did a lot of the legwork yesterday. And so you're following back up to see how things went last night. All right. And this is from Stacy Campbell. This is old school. We all grew up on this. And this is someone who was like number one in the company, but he's like, this old school piece is so important. So you want to make sure that in web PDI, we have their schedule. So like, okay, let's go through your schedule, make sure their goals and how many they have are in web PDI. Cool. Do not count. Oh, they can input it on their own. They won't, they usually won't. So if they did, great. But while you're reviewing their schedule, go ahead and do that. All right. So I'm like, all right, so let's look. So we got Sandra tomorrow at 6. So what do they do again? And if you're like, oh, that's the nurse, right? I'm like, all right. Because ideally you meet with some of the same people you met with, but the fact is you guys don't all work every day, right? Like those of you working Friday, Thursday don't all work Friday. So it might be different people, right? So the best thing you can do when you're doing these PCs, so like tomorrow, this is gonna happen tomorrow for the couple of people we have. But next week, Jackie, Chris, and Molly, like we're gonna all be doing this on Thursday night. Well, guys, you'll just pull up. You want to have the web PDI pulled up, and Molly will show you guys how to do that when we finish here. And just in their long-term notes, write these notes down. Cool. Like just write down like this many max, number 1 max, so and so. Like everything they tell you, just put it in there, so that when the person comes the next day and looks, the notes are right there. Cool. So don't write it in your own paper that no one's gonna see. Put it in web PDI so we see it. Okay, and then we can make edits to that. So then that makes it really easy when I pull up web PDI the next day. Even if you talked to them last night, Jackie, and you're not here the next day, I can pull up and I'm like, oh, okay, awesome. So Jackie said that you're going for this, or you're excited about buying a car. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, awesome. I'm like, let's go over your customers. I'm like, where is Sandra? She said that was your number 1. Like we're just going through. I'm like, his wife and husband going to be there? And they're one of your top 5, right? I'm like, awesome. If they're not, dig in a little further, and it just makes sure that we're getting in front of the right people, and just build confidence if they're the right type of customer. And I'm like, hey, what do you think they're going to buy? If you already see it in the notes, you're like, oh, so And honestly, we can probably, I don't know. I like them thinking about it. Don't listen to me. I was gonna say you don't have to do it the first day, but I like to talk about the sales stuff because it's just getting them thinking about what people are buying, and we want them in a buying expectation. So, like I'm like, oh, what did you think they're gonna buy? And so if it was on there, be like, so you still think they're gonna buy that homemaker? You think they're gonna buy bigger, right? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, all right, well, you're gonna learn today about accessories. You're gonna learn about bigger things, and so I'm excited to really help you set up there. All right. If they, so I'm like, so do you think they could buy a homemaker or an ultimate signature if they liked it? I'm like, could you see them buying a full set? If no, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, so why'd you, and positive, if they're not so positive, you don't want to say, well, why'd you pick them? All right. You want to make sure you're like, oh, so why did you want to show them this weekend? I'm like, do you think they could at least get something? I'm like, do you think they'd buy at least something to help you out? I'm like, at a scale of 1 to 10, how confident were you that they'll buy something to own Cotco and help you out? All right. We just want to make sure that they feel good that the person's going to be a sale, because we know that when they are, there's just such increased confidence when they get that first order, guys. I don't care if it's a cutting board. Like when they get that first sale, it just feels so good to get that first order. And I'm like, hey, I'm like, first order, many more to come. I'm so excited for you. And you could celebrate the hell out of that first order with them. If not a big set, I'm like, what do you think they would get? And I'm like, every time I'm like, if you're seeing the right people, I'm like, if you talk to any of our top, I'm like 9 out of 10 people get something right. It might be a fishing knife, it might be whatever, it might be a big set, it might be a small set, it might be a custom, might be a gift for someone. But you just want to make sure you're always in front of the best people and Mac customers, because we know that Mac customers buy Costco, right? And so if they have non-Macs, book first, then you want to guide this, right? And so I didn't have this in the first day, but like when we're checking what who they booked, we always want to look and say, oh, hey, who's this? And it's like a 2 or 1, it's not a Mac. I'm like, hey, by the way, so first of all, you guys need to write this down. 2 things: that if you see someone who's already booked stuff on the first day, guide them with this. If not, the next day you're going to guide with this. But you want to say, so first, I only allow 2 exceptions the first weekend, right? So between Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, they should only have 2 exceptions of people that are not max. All right. So please jot that down so we're all on the same page. So it's like, hey, your guys' first weekend. I know Mrs. Kristen, Mr. and Mrs. Kristen give you guys 2 exceptions. Because maybe it's like, your parents and like hers, like they don't have a house, or it's your like auntie who is divorced or widowed, but she loves to cook. She throws parties all the time. Like there's good exceptions. It's just there's still more skill set. So remember how they talked about the basketball analogy, all right? And guys, just to cover it again, if you don't know the basketball analogy, like easiest shot to make is a layup right under the basket. Cool, layup shots. Those are the easiest. When you learn how to play basketball, I mean, think about it. Your parents hold you over the basket, right? You throw it in, and then you learn how to do the layup shot. And the further away you go from a basket, the harder of a shot it is. This isn't like an opinion, it's a fact. You can look at NBA statistics. 95% of layups should go in, right? But now when you're at the free throw line, a good percentage of the free throw is 70% or higher. But now when you go to the 3-point line, it's like 40% or higher. Okay. Now, if you have 40% of the layup, you should not be in the NBA. All right. But nobody has a 90%, 95% on a 3-point. Okay. I don't want to say nobody, but that's not normal. Okay. A good 3-shot is 40% or more. So what we know, and sorry, 3-pointer. What we know is just statistically, the further away you are from the basket, the harder a shot it is. Same thing here. Cool. Your layups are your Mac customers. Those are your easiest shots. And so if you're trying to see somebody who is maybe they're married homeowner, they're a little younger, a little older, or maybe they're single, right? They're average age and they own a home. They're a homeowner, but they don't have all 3, right? That's kind of like a free throw shot. All right. And so when you're good, not when you're new, when you're good, you should make 70% of those. All right. When you're good. And then if you're trying to see someone that's like not a homeowner, that's like a 3-point shot. Okay. Or, you're further away from that basket. And so new people, I mean, it's like goose egg, 0 for 10, maybe 1 for 10. Like, but when you're good, it's about 4 out of 10. Right. And so it's a harder shot. And when they don't own a home, they're not necessarily making investments for their home, but they might need a gift for a friend, or need this, or want a couple of things for them. But you don't want to spoil your leads yet. All right. So this is the key thing you guys want to cover with them. So you don't want to spoil your leads yet, because you haven't learned how to shoot all the different shots yet. All right. So again, You don't want to spoil your leads yet because you haven't learned how to shoot all the different shots yet. All right. And so this is what you say. So in basic training, all right, we teach you how to get your layups done. Cool, how to nail those layups. That's what we teach you in basic training. But we don't teach you how to shoot the free throws. We don't teach you how to shoot the 3-point shots yet. Okay. By the way, you're going to get coaching on that Monday. You're going to get more coaching on that Wednesday, Thursday. You're going to get more coaching on that Saturday. Like there's coachings your first week to help teach you how to shoot all the shots because eventually you'll be shooting all over the court, right? We want to take it one step at a time and make sure that you get confidence and gain skills in the basics before we teach you the tougher stuff. Does that make sense? And they're like, oh, okay. And guys, that is the best analogy I've ever heard. And I heard it 20 years ago and I still use it today because it makes sense. And it's not like you're Kristen, you're trying to get them not to do demos or not to get paid, or you don't want them to like max. No, it's like, I want to help you succeed. And I don't want you to spoil leads that when you know how to shoot those shots, you're going to be like, dang it. If I would have known this, I would have gotten a sale. Yeah, that's why I told you to wait. So I'm like, if you know 100% for sure they're going to buy and you're going to get a ton of leads from them and you feel good not having the skills yet to go see them, you get up to 2 exceptions. Cool. But you want to make them smart. So if you're not 100% for sure, I would wait until later this week. You're going to see them eventually, but let's get a little more skill under your belt. All right. So that's how you want to guide that conversation. And for anyone watching this, that little piece is a part worth rewinding and scripting it out to make sure that you hit that the right way. All right. Because if you do that wrong, people can be like, oh, you just don't want me to do, or you don't want to pay me base pay, or like, I don't know, you can just get people that are weird. So you want to make sure you present it the right way so that they understand why you want them to wait and that you're not just trying to screw their business, but you're trying to help them succeed. Okay. And then here, you have here just shaping expectations, right? So depending on how many, appointments that they have, you're showing them like, hey, with those 6 appointments, if you're just average, you can still get to $1,000, right? 6 appointments, you can have 3 or 4 sales with the average of 300-400 bucks. Like you hit it, right? The average order is 450. But even if you're a little bit lower, which could happen being new, you can still knock that thing out, right? I mean, if you sold one homemaker, right, and one other, like, boom, you just hit your $1,000. Or even if 2 or 3 people just by average sales, you can get halfway there, right? And so when you have higher flyers, shape bigger excision, I'm like 8 appointments. I'm like, you can drop a homemaker, do a small set, 3 average orders, and you're at $2,000 or more, right? Maybe even $3,000, and you hit 2 promotions. And they're like, oh, wow, all right. And you just whatever based on who they had and whatever, you're just kind of like regurgitating that and showing them like what's possible, right? And so you just want to look at where's their list so far, how many more numbers did they get last night, and make sure like, hey, today throughout the day, as you keep thinking, as you're on demos, you want to keep adding names, you want to keep adding numbers, you want to keep asking family for so and so's number, and keep expanding that list because that's going to really help you fuel this week. All right, and then just make sure that when they're making next call. So I'm like, hey, so let's say Michael, training ends at 4, and they have an availability for a 5 o'clock, a 6:30, an 8 o'clock, a 9:30, 11. But let's say that they have their 6:30, but they don't have a 5 o'clock, right? So when I toss them, like, hey, by the way, let's work hard. Like even right now, you can still make a couple calls. And when I give you guys breaks, I would definitely make calls. And when you're asking for that 5 o'clock, you can offer 2 times and say, is 4:45 good or is 5:15 better? Cool. We can do that. But if we don't get booked during training, are you cool staying afterwards to make some calls and see if we can land an immediate one or get some more for tonight and tomorrow? I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, I want to make sure that we have a plan that if you're not booked, you have that. And then if you have someone reschedule on you, Michael, you were going to work during that time anyway, use that time to make more calls. Cool. And if you do that, you'll really set yourself up in a strong way. They're like, all right, cool. So that's it, guys, but you want to make sure we're diving in. We want to make sure that it's what's in it for them, right? How is this going to help them? By you guiding them in that way, like how are they going to be stronger, better, get off to a faster start, get more referrals, gain more confidence, and making sure that we're setting people up for success. And we know that if they're getting themselves in front of Mac customers, they're going to do the best because we've taught them. We haven't taught them enough skills to handle, some of the other objections and things that happen when someone is not a Mac customer and it's not as easy of a shot. All right. So questions, comments, we'll wrap up. Dance. Everyone just dance. All right, cool.